Hey, hey, F50 women. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I am with Mary Katherine Morales, and she's a speaker, author, certified trainer, university fundraiser executive, and a devout woman of God. She is a devoted wife and mother, visionary leader, and a woman of principle. I'm so thankful to have you here today, Mary. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I've listened to some of your other podcast interviews. So thank you for all the good that you're doing in the world and the impact you're making. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. And I know without a doubt that you're going to have some incredible inspiration for all of us. So I'm looking forward to it. And I know when listeners listen to it, hopefully they'll listen again and again and get something new. Okay, so we want to start by getting to know you, Mary. Please tell us about who you were as a younger woman. What did you want to be? What were you like?
So, I think it ebbs and flows. What I was like is probably a lot like most little girls, right? There were times where I had dreams the size of Texas. And then there were other moments where I felt small and just not worthy. I was shy and bold at the same time. And I think I'm still like that today. From a very young age, who I was and who I am is I love family. I love spending time with friends. And I was like that as a little girl too. I just loved being around my brother and mom and dad. I have a huge family. So that's really who I was.
Okay. And so let's jump over all of that meaty middle and tell us about who you are now, what you do. Tell us about your purpose and how, well, don't tell us how, because we'll get to that next, about your purpose right now in your life.
Well, there was one moment I actually skipped over as a little girl that I think helped to define who I became today. And like many little girls, I had a unique set of challenges. One of the biggest challenges I faced is that I was deaf as a little girl. And they discovered that when I was in second grade. My second grade teacher, Mrs. Miller, called my mom and said, "You know what, Sandy? She's not actually disobedient or rude. I think she's deaf. I don't think she can hear us." That goes back to why I felt a little shy and sometimes a little insecure. But that experience in my life helped to define who I am today. Being able to really shift that sense of being different or not a part of for a while took me down a couple of jaded paths, which I'm happy to talk about. But who I am today is I really believe, and I use this declaration all the time, is I am a powerful, authentic, trusting woman of principle and child of God. And that's who I am today.
Okay, good. So before we get to talking about what you do with that, how did you get from that shy young little girl who eventually learned to this powerful, authentic, trusting woman of God that you are? Tell us about some of the hiccups, some of the lessons. Give us some of that.
Oh, where do I begin?
Yeah.
Life is a series of highs and lows. What I learned about being deaf as a little girl and the story and the belief system that I created about that experience is that sometimes people can be mean-spirited, sometimes people can make fun of or think differently than people who look different than they do, right? And so I learned in one regard, I learned to be self-protective. I learned to tell small white lies about myself because I felt like there was something inherently wrong with me because I couldn't hear. Kind of catapulted me into not being entirely honest as a woman because I thought I had to be perfect. And I began to develop the dis-ease of perfectionism. I don't know if there's a lady within the sound of my voice, if you can relate to that. I am now a recovered perfectionist. When I got my hearing back, I had some decisions to make. I had to learn how to let people in. I had to learn that it's okay to be perfectly imperfect. And one of the other defining moments is because of all those stories of shame and unworthiness, I began to experiment with things that aren't good for you. And I am very grateful to say that I'm in recovery. I've been in the program of recovery for 25 years. I'll be going into my 17th year next year in sobriety. That was another sliding door moment for me.
Okay.
It was another real challenge that I had in my life. As that little girl with the dream size of Texas who loved to draw and sing, I was always in musicals and plays. I never imagined that I would have to face overcoming a life-threatening addiction. What I learned is that, like the scriptures say, I really am strong and courageous. I really do have the perseverance that it takes to overcome some of life's greatest challenges. But now I'm able to use those experiences from the past and those challenges that used to define me as an opportunity to be compassionate, to be kind, to be open, to be inclusive, and to be perfectly imperfect. Because what I learned along the way is that there's no intimacy in perfectionism. There's no joy in perfectionism. And so what I've practiced is being perfectly imperfect and finding the joy in
that. How do you find joy in being perfectly imperfect? How do you do that?
So the way that I've learned it is that, and because my perfectionism kicked up about 6 years ago, I told a small white lie to my boss because I wanted to impress him.
Okay.
And I felt like if I didn't tell him this one fact, that he would be so disappointed in me. So my shame and unworthiness kind of kicked up. I told that small white lie, and I felt so guilty. And he found out that I wasn't entirely honest. I remember I called one of my mentors at the time, and she said, "Girl, what?" She said, "Mary Katherine, that is a red flag moment, because there's no intimacy, Mary Katherine, in trying to be perfect. What had you tell your boss this small white lie instead of just being honest with them?" And it was the shame and the heaviness of trying to be perfect. So how I've discovered and how I've learned to be perfectly imperfect is what I wrote about in my book. And my very first practice in becoming who I am today, powerful, authentic, trusting woman of God, my most fundamental practice is the practice of simple honesty and the power of transparency.
Okay.
And that's how I learned to find the joy in being perfectly imperfect, is I learned the tools, and I'm happy to share those if you want me to.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
So how it works is that my very first practice is being honest, and our lives are a series of values, practices, beliefs, among other things. In order for me to get sober and to become joyful and confident and to really say, "Yes, God, I will go forward. I will do my best to rise to the call that you have on my life today."
Right.
Being honest is a fundamental baseline. Can I do some show and tell here?
Yes.
Speaking to your listener. The way I found joy in becoming perfectly imperfect is in my hand. For those of you who can't see it, is a little vial with water in it. And this is the power of transparency. Behind the practice of being honest is a principle that we call transparency.
Mm-hmm.
A principle transcends space and time. Principle is a North Star or an anchor that we strive towards while we practice being honest. In my left hand is a crystal clear vial of water, and in my right hand, it's red, right?
Yeah.
Like a sweatshirt. Yep. And what happens is every time I tell a small white lie, I move from being beautifully transparent closer to this red vial. You can almost imagine it for your listeners. If you were holding a bottle of water and you had red food coloring and you just started dropping one drop at a time, all of a sudden it's no longer transparent. It's a dark red. Now it's still beautiful. Just like us, we're still beautiful and we're still children of God. But if I'm not transparent, then I have feelings of remorse, feelings of guilt, feelings of shame. But for most of us, not just in my opinion, but real research would say that most of us end up here. And this is like a bottle of olive oil. It's kind of a light yellow for those who are listening. As we practice and use transparency as our guide, can I use you and I as an example?
Yes, you can.
Julia and I are in a conversation. We'll pick like politics are our red hot topic right now, right?
Yes.
And regardless of what side of the table you're on, if you're not on that side of the table, you're wrong. We could talk about that for a week too, but not today. But the point is that even though I want to be honest with Julia, even though I know it's the right thing to do, if I have a faulty belief system that says, if I tell Julia what I truly believe about my political preferences, my political beliefs, a couple of things, it'll hurt or damage our relationship. Mm-hmm. We won't see eye to eye. She will get upset with me, or she can't handle it. And all of those faulty belief systems influence my ability to be honest and transparent with you.
Yes, they do.
What I teach the women that I coach and what I talk about in my book is that your belief systems will fail you. Mm-hmm. Because they're from a lifetime of experiences, but the principle of transparency guides me in a conversation with you where I might say something like, Julia, you know what? Our friendship is so important. And I want to share my perspective, my beliefs, my opinions of the question you're asking me about politics. Do I have permission to be as transparent with you as possible?
Yeah.
And that gives you and I permission to be as transparent as possible and not give in to the spirit of fear. Because once I give in to the spirit of fear, once I tell myself that if I'm honest with someone, that it could hurt the relationship, the science actually tells us, and Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about this, every time I tell a small white lie, every time I gossip or say something nasty or hateful, it actually causes physical brain damage, influences my ability to be honest. But here's what I know from my own journey is, like I told you a few minutes ago, I did tell that small white lie to my boss out of fear. But here's what my friend told me, Mary Katherine, we're going to hang up the phone now. And I want you to go into prayer and meditation. Okay. Just be honest with yourself. What would have you tell a lie to someone you respect?
Yeah.
What would have you tell a lie? One word: fear.
Fear.
And the enemy is a liar. The spirit of fear comes to steal. He comes to destroy. Right?
Yes.
And so once I could be honest with myself, it's ironic, right? Once I could be honest with myself and say, you know what? I was dishonest because I was afraid. I was afraid to lose my job. I was afraid to disappoint my boss. Fortunately, he showed me grace and didn't ask me again. I made a point that day to go back to the basics and to practice the joy of being perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
Saying, you know what, boss, supervisor, friend, I missed a deadline. I was late to work. I don't know the answer. At least when I practice simple honesty and try to be as transparent as possible, it keeps the relationship intact, and then we can work on problem solving.
I agree with that. And I've never thought through it as deeply as you're sharing it. But I know the people I love the most are the ones that are most transparent, for good or bad. I want to hear what you're thinking, or else you're not intimate. You're hiding from me. There's a part of you hiding from me, and we're not really intimate with each other.
And I'd love to send you a copy of my book. And that's exactly how I talk about it. Yeah. The minute I decide to be dishonest with someone in my life, all bets are off. This is not about condemnation. This is not about judgment. This is about empowering us to make healthier decisions one day at a time. Yeah. Because you're absolutely right. The science actually shows the minute I'm dishonest, you and I are in a movie. You're playing a role, I'm
Yes.
playing a role,
Mhm.
and we're not actually connecting. We are, which is what people are most afraid of, not being connected, not having a sense of belonging, a sense of hope, a sense of purpose. Those small white lies backfire on us. They don't serve us.
And so can I just say that in our churches, and you could probably speak to that even more, through this political craziness of the last 12, 18, how many ever years it's been, it feels like we've gotten more exposed to how we actually think and feel, but we haven't, like you said, we haven't been intimate enough. What are you thinking that for? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
This is an opportunity to be just like, I'm going to tell you what I feel and what I believe and what I'm experiencing, and you share the same. And we love each other, because if anybody has a formula to how this life is supposed to work, please write it down. I will read the book, because I don't know exactly God's plan. How has that been in terms of creating intimacy with people that don't agree with you, don't believe the same as you, don't have the same experience as you? That could be even in our own families, you know? How do you deal with that, and how has that shown up for you?
It's another practice, right? I'll give you a real example. One of my closest friends,
Yeah.
and again, we'll just use, we vote very differently. We voted for different people. We actually sat down and we were both a little bit nervous because we had never had that conversation before.
Right. Yeah.
But I asked her why she was voting for a candidate, and we had a really interesting discussion about why we were coming to the decision that we were coming to.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we could use race, we could use religion, we could use work experiences.
Yeah.
We could use been married forever and been married 3 times, 4 times as a difference in worldview.
Yeah.
We could use being raised with a ton of money versus being raised very poor. All of those are examples of sitting down with someone who has a very different worldview, has a very different life experience.
Mhm.
And one of my most favorite moments was one of my mentors. Her name is Betty Sproul.
Okay.
She's a tiny woman with a strong demeanor. Imagine a little tiny woman with dark skin and long dreads, standing just as quiet as she can be, but very strong presence. And she's a coach. She's a transformational mindset coach. She has been for almost 50 years. And one of the things she taught us as I was getting my master's in this work is she said, be the kind of listener that can shift the planet, that can change the world. And I was like, what does that even mean? And so she went on to say that exactly what I think is at the root of your question. When we take time, and Stephen Covey says this, right? Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Anytime I've ever walked into an office or a conversation, whether it's personal or professional, and my first priority was to listen and to understand you versus being right, the conversation, we could still walk away having very different perspectives.
Yes.
But at least I think we walk away more often than not being respectful and learning something we never learned before. And that's what Betty was saying, is be the kind of listener that you actually put yourself into the position of the person speaking and listen in a way that you're listening beyond the words and into the life experience. And so to answer your question, I think if more churches, more synagogues, more communities started there, we might find answers to the questions that we're asking.
I heard it recently as you're talking. I heard recently someone say, or I read, don't say to yourself anymore, if I were you, I would do. Don't say, if I were you, I would have done this or that. It's meaning that you think of somebody else's situation, like you said, not from your shoes. If I was in your shoes, I would do this. But if I was you in your shoes, I would do this. So you're more understanding how that other person is experiencing the world. And I think that's so incredible and incredibly important to listen. That helps you to grow, connect, learn, and shift the world. Be the kind of listener that can shift the planet. Help me to be one of those.
Well, I haven't figured it out yet. I'm on the path.
Yes.
Dr. Brene Brown talks about the phrasing that you were sharing, which is so beautiful. What she said is the critics that are in the cheap seats, that aren't getting their ass kicked every day by doing something good, but are just critiquing how the game is played. Those are the only people not allowed in her communities, her Facebook groups, because she calls them the cheap seats.
Okay.
And it's almost like someone sitting on the 50-yard line critiquing the football team that's never played football.
Yeah.
It's so easy to do that.
And I don't know anything about football.
But I know that guy should have caught the ball.
That's right.
You know? And so I think that I love what you're sharing is that how do we get on the field in our lives?
Yeah.
And try to put ourselves in a position where, we can understand someone else's life experience.
Understand. Nobody's making you agree. Just understand. And then we can hopefully make better united decisions.
Yes.
So I'm curious, how did you come through your experience to become this powerful woman of God? How did you find God? Did you always know him, or did you always go to church? Tell us about how that came about.
Yes, I have to say I've always been a Jesus girl. I've had little pictures of him when I was a little girl. When I was deaf as a little girl, I would literally pray that Jesus would come sit on my bed, and I'd say, I won't tell anybody, just come help get my hearing back. Lord, please bring my hearing back. I've always loved and believed that there was a higher power, a higher consciousness, a higher source of love. It wasn't really until I did have a come to Jesus moment. May I tell you about that?
Yes, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Now, imagine, those of you who are watching, I look like I did my hair today for the video, but 20 plus years ago, I was a very different human being. I was 40 pounds lighter. I was an addict. I was broken inside and out. I was almost homeless. I was at my parents' home, and I did not have another place to live. My addiction was winning. I was literally dying. And my dad was cutting the lawn at the farthest part of his property. And I was consumed with the desire to use drugs and alcohol. For any of you that love sugar, maybe that's a great way. Like you got to have the tea, the cookie, yes. I was going into the closet and reaching in for my next fix. And this is where I had an encounter with the Holy Spirit. I was like, God, please, 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 I'll take anything but this. Because I knew I was dying.
Okay.
And I said, I named those big 5 diseases that everybody knows. I'm not even going to repeat them. But almost as if I'm talking to you right now, I said, God, please help me. I'll take anything but this, because at least people won't be so condemning and so judgmental on my life. And literally I heard, Mary Katherine, you will recover. This is your cross. You will bear it and recover, and you will write a book about the journey through hell to home.
Really? You just heard it like I'm talking to you.
Yes.
Inside. Right.
Yeah. And those are words I had never used before, but my response was, no, that is the worst idea I've ever heard. Don't you know, Father God, that I am consumed with shame? I don't want to write a book about all my failures. That's like the craziest idea I've ever heard.
Right.
But in that moment, Julia, what I knew for certain, and this is what I would say to any of you that are listening today that are facing one of those big 5 health concerns. Maybe you just lost your dream job. Maybe you just got your last paycheck. Maybe you're facing a real challenge emotionally, physically, or spiritually, is do not give up. The Spirit of God is with you. That's when I knew. I didn't stay sober that day. I still had a very long, treacherous journey in front of me.
Right.
But I knew I wasn't doing it alone.
Yeah.
And many years later, one of my mentors said to me, Mary Katherine, are you going to be obedient? You know that you have been called to write this book. But I was so worried if I put down my biggest mistakes on paper and I told you about them, that I could not endure the condemnation or judgment. But I sat down. It was a quiet moment in Utah. My husband and I go snow skiing. It was 4:30 in the morning. Mm-hmm. I was ready to be obedient to the call that was upon my life. Mm-hmm. I got out a pen and paper, the old-fashioned notebook. And I said, how did I actually, because it was Simon T. Bailey, a mentor of mine, who said, Mary Katherine, how did you become the 2.0 powerhouse version of who you are? Okay. And I never thought about that before. And that's when I came up with my 5 practices. When I thought about how did I become free? How did I become confident? How did I begin living my life in what I believe is my higher purpose? Yeah. And that's how I got to my 5 practices.
Now, can you give us what those 5 are?
Yes. Be honest, be your word, serve others, run with champions, and God first. Put God first.
Tell me about Run with Champions. What does that mean? You just find the Oprahs and the big ladies and run with them?
I find women like you, my friend. We are the everyday heroes. We are ordinary women living extraordinary lives. And it's you that say we develop unshakable character.
Yes.
Achieve extraordinary things. Yeah. So running with champions, again, is a practice that has a very powerful principle to it. Okay. So running with champions, there are a couple of things. Research says we are the sum total of the 5 people we spend the most time around. My question for your listener is, who's your core 5? Are they the kind of people who will call you to the mat when you are moving in a direction that is outside of your higher purpose? Do they have permission to do that? And number 2, will they celebrate you when you are winning at being an everyday extraordinary woman? Yeah. The principle behind that is victory.
What does that mean?
Think in terms of what the world would look like. Okay. Jesus, and this is coming from a Christian worldview, believing that scriptures are true. When Jesus said his last words, "It is finished," you are victorious. My whole life, I believed that I had to prove myself, which is how I became a perfectionist. And how I began to feel as though if I'm not perfect, you will not like me, which is one of the lies of the enemy, which creates fear, right?
Yes.
But the principle of running with champions in your core 5 is I'm perfectly imperfect. I'm cool with that. I can find joy. But how different would the world be if we treated each other like you are already victorious, Julia? You are a child of God. You are beautiful. You are perfectly imperfect. You are brilliant. You are valued. You are strong and courageous. And the world treated me that way. So here's how it works. I had been sober for a long time. I was in business, and there were a community of people at work that were out to ruin my character. They were telling lies about me and taking that information to my boss. I was actually angry and I began to get concerned. But I continued to run with champions spiritually, professionally, emotionally. I've got my gal pal. I've got my tribe. We pray, we meditate, we take care of ourselves one day at a time. I knew that I was already victorious. I knew that I was a woman of God, and I knew what they were saying about me wasn't true. So I leaned in. I practiced all of the things that I had learned about being honest, called a couple of them to a mat, but I did it in a very different way than I would have done 20 years ago.
Right.
And I said, okay, this is what I heard you saying, but let's sit down. Let's break that down. Let's talk about what the things you are saying. But I went into the conversation knowing that I was victorious, knowing that I was a child of God, knowing that I was loved. And so I approached very difficult conversations knowing that I didn't have anything to prove.
That's right.
And there's so much more in my book
In the
about
book.
other ways that you can run with champions. But at the very least, pick your core 5, be very intentional about it, and know the principle is, girl, you are already victorious.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. But what if you already have a tribe? You have what you think are your 5 champions, but somehow you're trying to run a slightly different direction or take it higher. And maybe some of these 5 are making excuses to stay at that place. What do you do then?
So what I do, and I think what most successful minded people do, is we have people in our life. For example, when I wanted to train to become a long distance cyclist, my longest ride was 150 miles. I had to run with champions that already were further down that path, who were used to running at 40, 50, even 60 miles. I became stronger. I became faster. And I learned the tools and skills to be able to ride 150 miles at one time. But it didn't start there.
Yeah.
If you want to become a public speaker, run with speakers. I'm also a fundraiser in neuroscience and community redevelopment. So I am a part of associations and groups with better fundraisers.
Okay.
And so that's what I would tell your community, is that your core 5 should be women who are up to changing the world. They could be a teacher in a first grade classroom, but she's changing the world. She might be a prayer warrior running a women's group on Wednesday nights that nobody knows about. She is a warrior on the spiritual front. The biggest thing is, if you want to get to somewhere you've never been, you've got to run with people who've already are there or are moving in that direction, because excellence draws out the excellence in us.
Yes.
Like being pulled in different directions. And that stretching is uncomfortable. When I was training with better cyclists, I was intimidated, but they were teaching me, and they're in order to ride with 50 people and you are 1 inch from their tire, got to pay attention to the techniques so you don't bring down the whole pack. It drew out something in me that I never even knew was possible. How do you run with champions?
I'm in that spot where I'm searching for that in different areas. In terms of prayer and the spirit, I feel like God brought me to one woman she can pray, and you're just like, is the room moving? When you're with them, you're just like, wait a minute, I got to take this hesitation off. Let's go. Yes. In other areas, I'm looking for that. But that's good. Love that you said you still have your girls. I was hesitating because, I just leave everybody behind. But you're not leaving anyone behind. You're just growing different muscles. And
you're being really intentional about, when we come to define our purpose and our mission, which can sometimes seem overwhelming to women, the data actually shows that most Americans, only 25%, have ever sat down to think about what is their purpose. So the other 75% can't answer that question. There's no condemnation in that. It took me years to be able to do that. When I wanted to write my book, I was part of a group of people who had already written a book or were writing a book. So we kind of rolled up our sleeves together and say, how do we do this?
So you talked about your mentor. Was there anyone that helped you along this journey, maybe even earlier when you were going through the addiction? I know the Holy Spirit hit you. Was there anyone else who gave you a push or a leg up?
Oh, so many people were kind to me because I was so sick and so lost and so scared. All of the nurses and doctors, when I would go into treatment or rehabilitation to try to get well. But there were a couple of people. Her name is Stephanie. She was a mentor of mine for 14 years. She was very special to me. If it wasn't for Stephanie, Mary Katherine, I would be a very different Mary Katherine. We met for years every Friday at noon, and she helped me through a process. My girlfriend Trisha was instrumental for many years, very early on. She said I would call her at 10 o'clock at night and ask her to pray for me. I don't remember doing this, but I was so filled with fear. Now she's one of my closest friends, and we are doing great things together. My friend Simon T. Bailey has been a mentor of mine for 17 years. His wife are very good friends with my husband, Al, and I. So Simon was very instrumental in my life. My friend Jim was one of the people that refused to give up on me. He was very special, but hands down, my husband, my mom and dad, and my brother are by far the heroes in my journey. If it wasn't for their prayer and their undying commitment to seeing past the addiction, who God was calling me to be, they are the unsung heroes of my story for sure.
They never stop believing in you.
No.
That's wonderful. And an inspiration because, who knows who we know, whether our children, grandchildren, friends, neighbors, parents, who's going to get into a situation of illness or addiction. And I know they get deep enough and you're like, oh, well, they're done. There's nothing I can do. But believing in someone sometimes is a better medicine than whatever we're getting from our doctors. Thank you all for being your mentors. If you met your younger self now, what would be the one piece of advice you would give her?
It just brings me to tears, but to believe in yourself, to know that you are worthy and that it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to make mistakes and to make good decisions based on knowing that you don't have to be perfect to be accepted by others.
So what's next for you? What's your future vision? What's in store? Tell us what's coming up or what you're hoping for.
I think that through all of the highs and lows of my life, I have been able to create the most amazing journey. I have a book called Becoming Woman of Principle. And so what's next for me is this year, as the world reopens, is to get out there and talk about it, because it's an empowerment tool to equip women to say yes to the call that's upon their life. So it's getting my book out there and talking about that. I just took on a brand new role in, I'm a nonprofit executive, and I just started working at a community foundation. Everything I do ties back to helping women to be who God is calling them to be. So through my book, through this new career, and then I'm a speaker. So anytime there's an opportunity to go out and share these 5 practices with women, I've got a new course starting in January for women who are leaders, but who feel somewhat disappointed, like they know that there's more. It's really about discovering your higher purpose and then setting goals, taking inspired action, and having some accountability for that. That class starts in January.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. We just need it so much. When I hear you say becoming a woman of principle, do you find that women run away from it? I can see some women feeling like that's sort of too much. I mean, I don't know. It just feels, I anticipate women sort of stiff arming you, to use a football term. Do you anticipate that a little bit?
I really appreciate that question, because I think it's easy when Simon actually said to me, Mary Katherine, you can sometimes be intimidating because you look as though you've never had a problem in your life. Like, what do you know about It's true. And I acknowledge that. So in my book, I actually show a picture of what I looked like the day I checked into treatment. And I'm very transparent about all of the challenges I've faced, about all of my limiting beliefs about me and the world, and the impact it had on my life. So when we talk about being a woman of principle, it's about women coming to believe that they can truly be who God is calling them to be and have the life He intended. Most women are living a good life, but they're not actually living the life that they dreamed about when they were 10 years old. Becoming a woman of principle is about saying, I'm willing to take a few risks,
Mm-hmm.
live an extraordinary life
Yeah.
by her terms, by her definition,
Yeah.
not mine, but living by a set of principles: transparency, generosity, wisdom, victory. Those are principles.
Okay.
And the idea is that as a woman of principle, when we begin to live our life by those terms, we can really do anything.
Yes, I believe that. Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you that I may or may not have sent you earlier, but I'm going to throw the curveball at you if I didn't.
Do it.
As a woman of God, why do you think evil spreads faster than love, or do you not even think that's true?
I do think it's true.
Okay.
Evil has a tendency of spreading because we haven't mastered the basics.
Okay.
We are living in a world, and I'm going to go back. This is when I wrote the book, the hardest chapter to write was on honesty.
Right.
And I truly believe that the reason why slander, blasphemy, anger spreads faster than love and kindness is because, culturally speaking, we live in a world that empowers you and I to tell lies to each other, that tells us it is okay for you to lie to win in politics, to lie to win in your career, to lie to overcome something happening in your marriage, to lie to your children, to lie to your spouse. And this is one of my most favorite things to talk about. This is like the 5 practices in my book may seem like, duh, of course you should be honest. Of course you should keep your word. But until we actually start doing those things, until we can be in a world that says it's better to be honest than to lie and to be divided. That is one of the reasons why fear and negativity spreads faster, is because we give each other permission.
Yeah.
Live in a culture that says you can lie all day long as a media reporter. And, people are like, I think 70% of people right now in a recent poll said they don't trust most people.
That's really sad.
And it's because we are lied to all the time.
Yes.
And so as everyday heroes like you and I start turning off the TV, start not going on social media platforms that we know are lying to us.
Yeah.
As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We will love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yeah.
Because hunger exists in the world.
Yep.
Because we allow it.
Yeah.
We are the space for that.
Yeah.
And we have to just get back to the basics.
Yeah.
We have this one powerful thing called freedom of choice.
Yeah.
You hear people say, well, he lied to me first, so I'm just going to lie back.
Yes. Oh gosh, that makes me crazy. Yeah. And that's not how this is supposed to work. Yeah.
And so I think as women of faith, as people, and there's so much good work that happens in the world every day through mission groups, through missionaries, as we continue to let our light shine, because scripture tells us that you are the salt and the light of the world.
Yeah.
And as people, which is why knowing that we're victorious is so important.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably simplifying it, and it's like, maybe it seems too simple, but I think as families get back to the basics, then communities get back to the basics.
Yeah.
And we've got to start thinking critically, like, is what I'm hearing on the national media actually true? Is what I'm hearing or reading in the newspaper actually represent what's really going on, or is it one man's opinion? And until we as believers, we as human beings are willing to think, well, that doesn't really make sense. Is that actually true, or is it propaganda?
Or is that just what you're feeling, or how you want me to think?
Why do you think it spreads more than the good in the world.
Mary, you're not allowed to throw it back at me. I honestly don't understand. In the last couple of years, that's just been my biggest question, because I don't get why when I try to love you and I try to be kind to you, people don't grab onto it, but start talking about how stupid somebody is. And everybody's like, oh yeah, well, I heard her doing this and that. Yeah, but why are we doing that? And even like with your story, so Mary was this person, now she is this person. And so if you become a leader now and I'm following you, and then somebody can come and say, well, that's the Mary I knew. Why can't we just say, yes, go Mary, let's go? I don't think I had the answer to why. It makes me so frustrated. Why, when I try to love you, don't you accept it? But let me try to do something bad or get you to do something bad with me, and we're all on board. I don't get it.
Again, I talk about this too in one of my chapters, becoming impeccable, practice of being our word. And the word impeccable means pure. The Bible tells us to think on things that are true, that are noble, that are just, that are pure.
Yeah.
And as long as we allow, it all goes back to the mind. It's actually what I teach in my coaching small groups. This is what I talk about. When we realize that thinking is a practice, even gossip or saying, well, that person is blah, 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 that's just the habit.
Yeah.
And I actually had one of my donors say to me, gosh, Mary Katherine, you don't have an opinion. I am just trying to practice self-discipline, because just because I think it doesn't make it true. Just because I think it doesn't mean I have to say it.
Yeah.
And that's a hard practice, because it is so tempting to say something about someone or something that diminishes the light in them. It's a habit.
And then we get so pulled. I don't know why, but it's such a draw. You can just get pulled into it. And I don't want to be that anymore.
No. And I will say, one of my favorite books, and I have it here, it's called Switch on Your Brain, Dr. Caroline Leaf. This book, you can tell it's like a study book. I've marked up all of the pages.
Yeah.
It actually teaches human beings what is a thought, what is thinking, and how to practice changing your thought process, which then changes what we speak and how we speak. It is a practice that has changed my life. I don't do it perfectly. I'm perfectly imperfect. I say things I shouldn't say.
Yeah.
Going back to why fear in the world spreads, it has to have a source, right? There has to be a source for it to spread. If the line pinches with me, it can't go any further. So the question I would ask you and your listener is, are you willing to be the kink in the hose? Are you willing to
I'm writing that down. I love it. Because that gives you power.
Yes.
Yes, it can stop with me.
Yes.
Yes. And if there's more of people doing that, it can just all stop.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Are you willing to be the pinch in the hose? Yes. Very nice. I have a couple of questions for you from your playbook. Is that the book you would recommend all women read? Switch on Your Brain.
Yes, there are two books. One is Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf.
Okay.
And I'm not being self-promotive. I really do believe that my book, Becoming Woman of Principle, and the 5 practices in this book will literally change the life of a woman.
Yes. And that's what I want to do, because I believe every woman in every part of the world can change, no matter how great you are. You can be better until you're gone. Yeah.
And that's actually why I wrote the book. Transformation is not about doing it right once. It's about being open to what God has in store for us. I mean, look at how much fun you and I have had on this call.
This has been so great. Yes.
But we are open to transforming our thought process. And so my entire book is written in ing as a verb.
Right. Okay. I can't wait. Yes. You said you'll send me one. I want one.
I'll send it to you.
I'm looking forward to that too. Tell us one thing that you cannot miss doing every day.
One thing I cannot do every day, I am obsessive like literally obsessive about reading books. So I have stacks of them everywhere. And the one thing I do every day is I read and I study
Actual books.
every day.
That's awesome. Yes.
To the
Growing.
point where my husband is like, babe, put the book down. Like it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, I just want to read one more paragraph. I love
Yeah.
to learn. So I would say learn something new every day.
Okay. Nice. I think we should all do that. Even if it's just 5-10 minutes of something, golden nuggets. Yes. After this podcast, please tell everyone how we can get in touch with you, get your book, get on your website, or ask you questions or get involved with your workshops, training, or coaching.
All are welcome. We are a beautifully diverse group of women. So the very first way is womanofprinciple.com.
Okay.
Womanofprinciple.com. You can become part of the emails. I only send twice a week. I don't bombard you with different things. So you can be part of our exciting emails. Once a month, I have the Stronger Together Woman of Principle series. Talk about all things spirit, soul, and body, but we break them down so they're not esoteric. We get practical because what we practice, we become. Last week, we talked about being women in our 50s and menopause and the foods that affect our spiritual being or our mind. That's how practical they are. Yeah. And then finally, and you can do this through womanofprinciple.com. I have a private Facebook group where I post inspirational messages that women can use in their daily life.
Okay.
And then I'm on LinkedIn. It's Mary Katherine MK Morales. Thank
you so much. Thank you for all of that meat and all of the practicals on how to do what we need to do to be better women and even to overcome those bigger things.
Yes.
Bigger things and the smaller things. So thank you so much for this. I know everybody's going to love it. I'm going to love re-listening to it. And I'm so glad to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for all the amazing work you're doing in the world. Thank you for your joy. You are so easy to talk with. And I'm really looking forward. This is the first day of a friendship, I can tell. So thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Mary Katherine.
My pleasure.